Hello, everyone. Today we are talking about a third element in our sequel that we are going to have of the five elements that we are going to discuss in the terms of the scientific perspective of each of these elements and also the spiritual side of them. So thank you, Natasha, for being here with me. And
Absolutely.
today is the turn of air, and we are going to talk about sacred breath, the science and spiritual power of the air we breathe. So, we are going to discover how every breath influences your biology, the emotions, your consciousness, and the profound connection between your inner and your outer world. Because I think you will agree with me that every time we breathe and we, even if we close our eyes, is more in touch with that inner perspective, we can sense that we are connecting with something more powerful. No?
Absolutely. I 100% agree. And for me, air is really the bridge between the invisible and the visible, really. And it's the first thing we do when we're born into this world, we inhale, and that's the last thing we do when we leave this world is we exhale, right? Um, In my world, air governs the mind. It governs movement, communication, ideas, our breath, perception, our consciousness. And air carries information. It carries inspiration. It carries connection. And I think every tradition recognizes that air is the element that gives movement to life, right? And it's the single, like, we can live without water for a little while. We can live without food for a little while. We can live without sleep for a little while. But air is definitely the one that is most important element for us to be able to live. So, where the element of earth provides structure, and we spoke about water. We haven't done the element of earth yet, but we spoke about water is feeling and emotion. So fire provides transformation. Air provides meaning and direction
Mm.
in the spiritual world as well. So it's a very, very interesting how it works and how it, if we look at it from a physical perspective, um, air governs the breath and that oxygen exchange. It governs the lungs as well, our respiratory system. If we look at it, the diaphragm, the respiratory system, it's interesting when we go through big grief and we cry, we do that, that we can't breathe. Like when we're in that space of, going through, regulating our nervous system, we tend to use our breath and we use our breath for quite a bit. Like I remember when I had my car accident and I used to go to treatments every day, it was with my breath that I used to regulate the pain as they were doing the treatment as well, which is quite interesting. Um, but yeah, air is all about balance. And I think those are the rhythms of life. I mean, if we think about breathing, it's giving and receiving, right?
Mm.
Yeah.
I have been listening a lot of podcasts and conferences and documentaries about how the mitochondrial health is nowadays giving us a lot of light in terms of the cancer issues that we are having. And
Mm,
one of the most important nutrients for the mitochondria is oxygen, is
mm,
that air that we are breathing, is that oxygenation that we are helping these mitochondria to produce the energy. So every cell depends on oxygen to produce this ATP, this coin of energy that we have.
yeah.
And it's the currency of our body's energetic, let's say, profile. And the
Hmm.
mitochondria require this oxygen for an efficient metabolism because many of the uh, toxic products that mitochondria can have are uh, are due or are produced because we are not having a proper oxygenation, or we have some. oxygen reactive species that are the ones that start producing this oxidation on the radicals that we are seeing many times that starts permeating in our cells and derailing them from the
Hmm.
proper balance that they should have. So oxygen supports brain performance, the heart, the function of the heart,
Hmm.
muscle recovery, the immunity, the defense of our system, the detoxification. And when we have this poor oxygen delivery, we are forcing cells into less efficient metabolic pathways, and then that reduces a lot of the energy and increases the stress. No?
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned ATP there, which is quite fascinating for me because I believe that our life force energy directly influences ATP and producing of our cells and all the rest of that. So if we look at the spiritual side of air, um, it's in almost every tradition that I know, air links with spirit,
Mm, yeah.
which is very interesting. I mean, even if you take like, if you look at it from a Hebrew sense, a Greek sense, like pneumonia, Latin sense, spiritus, inspirare in Portuguese, prana, chi, ki, it all describe this force, this life force that moves through our breath, right? Connecting to what you were saying over there. And if we're not breathing, we're not allowing enough life force energy to move in. And I think we start to get brain fog. And because we're not getting enough oxygen, like you say, we're not regulating our body properly either, right? And air helps us to bring that conscious awareness. I mean, when we meditate and when we breathe, it's like you say, a lot of the times when we slow down and we think about our breath, and it's not enough to just breathe into our lungs. We actually really have to breathe all the way down to the pit of our stomachs to really allow our lungs to work, in that sense. And when we look at energetic illnesses or it's very fascinating. When we talk about like asthma and or children that are born. So my nephew was born, he wasn't able to breathe properly when he was born. And it was quite interesting in that sense where sometimes we say that if we were to entertain past lives, that perhaps the spirit hasn't had many time on earth and it needs to adjust to being able, learning how to breathe within this oxygen as well. But you also notice that when people don't breathe, it's really not wanting to take in life anymore or allowing everything that life has to offer us, right? We cut ourselves off in that sense. But air also teaches us that consciousness can't be held, right?
Hmm.
There's no form to it, which is brilliant. It moves, nothing stands still, right?
Yeah, that was also some thoughts that I had when we were going to discuss this topic, because I think that air and this invisible presence of that we are not seeing, of course, but we are sensing, and we need it to have this nutrient efficiency inside of us. We don't realize that a lot of information is moving through the air, and a lot of this collective consciousness that we are having and we are many times affecting other people passes through the air, passes through this
Mm-hmm.
uh, frequency that we have. Many of the chemical substances that we release, like pheromones, for
Mm,
example, also travel through the air, and we can perceive,
yeah.
like the dogs, when they smell a person that is dangerous, or
Yeah.
they don't feel that they can trust that person, they start barking because they have this powerful sense of smell, and they it's just the air that is transmitting those frequencies and that
Mhm.
chemistry for them, no? So that's for me,
Absolutely.
just amazing how this invisible force is helping us to also activate our intuitive senses, no?
Absolutely, absolutely. And like even from a business sense or a meeting sense, you walk into a room and it's like people say you could cut the air. There was so much tension, right? It's that vibrational frequency within that. Or you could be in there and you could go, oh my goodness, I can, you could so much feel the love in that room or whatever, or the happiness or the joy or
Yeah.
whatever that is, right? And I mean, there's so many breathwork exercises. It's absolutely incredible. Like I did a breathwork session. Actually, I did a breathwork meditation course once, and it hit me into a past life where I felt like just that breathing activated a memory
Mm.
that was quite incredible for me. And I felt like I was in Pompeii and I was being buried alive, and it actually helped to release one, it activated it, and then two, it helped me to calm it down and release it at the same time. But the incredible healing of air is fascinating for me.
Yeah, and it is one of the first things that we do when we are born. We need
Hmm.
to start crying so that we grasp some air. Children, when they are born, they need to grasp that air. They need to start crying and yelling a little bit for that grasp of air. So that's one of the first things. And one of the last things that we do is also that last breath that we have when we go and we leave the body. No, so that's just also amazing how these 2 points in time they connect and they close the cycle, no, that we have
Hmm.
here. And talking about also the quality of air that we breathe, that is so,
Yeah.
so much important because nowadays that we live in, well, at least for me, that I live in a polluted city. I'm grateful that I live at least in an area where I have a lot of trees and I have a lot of
Hmm.
nature around me. So that helps the people that lives in this small community where I live here, that
Hmm.
we breathe at least less pollution than the people that they don't
Nice.
have any nature around them, because air
Yeah.
pollution has been associated with a lot of chronic illnesses like reduced attention, memory decline,
Yeah.
brain inflammation, anxiety, depression, and
Mm.
also they that's why they feel a foggy brain. And I was listening now that the World Cup has closed.
Completely. Yeah.
Yes, that concluded.
Mhm.
And that they were going to play with a very bad air quality
Mm.
yesterday that they played, and it also affects the performance that you are having when you're having doing a physical activity, no? So there's a lot
Absolutely.
of things to see in in that area and to do something so that you can breathe some different quality of air. At least go to a place where you have a lot of nature once a week so that you can detoxify a little bit from all that air pollution that you are consuming, no?
Absolutely. And I think that's why it's so important to be by the sea, because the sea also cleans the air. So besides being in the mountains, the trees, especially pine trees, are incredible how they clear the air as well. But yeah, being near the sea as well. Also, salt is also a natural purifier as well, but that brings in a lot of kind of like pure air that comes through as well. But I'd like to talk about like air illnesses. So looking at, say, for example, we mentioned asthma, and when we look at asthma, it's really is about feeling restricted or the possible emotional parts of it, and these are just generalizing really. It's a kind of like the suppressed emotions, could be difficulty in feeling safe. And really, if we look at asthma from a spiritual perspective, it's also about, you know, where in my life do I feel that I cannot breathe or be myself? That tends to kind of like show up as well. Um, what I've been going through recently is I don't know if it's hay fever or allergies, but I've started developing these like later on because I never used to have any of that. And I got the message the other day. It was because I think because there's so many air pollutants with the chemtrails that are being put into the air, things that are being sprayed onto the crops. I think a lot of us become a lot more sensitive to pollen because it's not the pollen that it used to be. It's a pollen plus, kind of thing that comes through, I think, with a lot of stuff. And usually when we're looking at allergies, it really is a heightened sensitivity to the environment that we're feeling, or we're feeling under attack, or, overstimulation, overwhelm, kind of like, it's just hypervigilance, that usually tends to come up usually at that time of the year. So it's really looking at, when we're going through these things, is looking at, where am I reacting, to that, beyond the physical, what have I lost my sense of ease in this world? Like what's going on,
Mm.
I don't know if you can relate to that from that medical perspective.
Well, I agree with people that suffer from asthma. I think that they have big um, emotional issues in
Mm-hmm.
terms of this belonging, in terms of this feeling that they are accepted, feeling that they don't fit in certain
Mm-hmm.
places, no, and they have this problem. And I have, well, many of the people that came to my mind that I know and that they have asthma, I
Mm-hmm.
can really pick up the traits of their personality that reflect those kind of emotions. No, that they feel that they have to do something so that people look at them. And
Yeah.
when they don't receive that kind of attention, they feel that they are not being recognized, or they feel they don't belong to the group of people, no? And it's just a cycle. It's just a
Mm-hmm.
constant cycle that they are start creating because people that know them,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes they can get, let's say, tired of
Yeah.
their demand of attention, no? And they don't understand that it's just a toxic cycle that they are creating. And
Yeah.
also they suffer a lot from gut issues because
Yeah.
the air that we are breathing, the lack of quality and the lack of air that we are not, oxygenating in ourselves affects the gut. And many of these systemic inflammation that we are creating alters the gut microbiota and the different strains, the different kind of bacteria that we have inside of us, and that affects the immune system. So it's also
Mm.
the consequence. It's internally, they are also producing these toxic loops where if
Yeah.
you don't have enough air or oxygen, your bacteria are not, let's say, healthy, and then
Yep.
you start having issues with the bacteria, with the gut health, and your gut health produces 70% of your immune cells. So
Oh, wow.
that's a lot.
Yeah.
That's a lot of let's say, um, I forgot the word, or of having this managing system of
Mm-hmm.
your gut. If it is affected by the oxygenation that you are not having, then your immunity is deprived, and
Yeah.
that's a symptom of asthma. Asthma
Mm-hmm.
people that have a very weak immune system usually. No?
Yeah. And thinking of that, the other one that comes up, which I see more and more people have, is the sleep apnea,
Mm? Yeah.
right? And closing off those airways as well. And for that, it's very interesting that that happens because that I usually see is related to difficulty in letting go of things. Again, it will affect the gut as well. Chronic stress. We're all under so much stress, right? And having to be hyper vigilant based on trauma, international, intergenerational trauma that comes in, right? Which
Mhm.
keeps us from fully resting as well, right? Completely giving into that. So it's quite interesting how that That is also related to, I suppose, an air kind of illness, I suppose. It's not even an illness. It's like, so I did a study that was very interesting. So I
Yeah.
was doing, when I first started doing craniosacral therapy, there is one of the levels where you end up doing inner mouth work. And one of my friends of mine, so I had to do 25 practices of inner mouth sessions because the mouth is very sensitive. So you have to be very, very gentle, especially when we're dealing with trauma in these whole areas, right? And I had a friend of mine that had just been diagnosed with sleep apnea. So I said, I made a deal with him. I said, hey, okay, I'm going to give you 10 sessions of cranial. You come and see me twice a week. And I want to see, I want to test it. But the deal is you can't do anything else. No other treatment, no nothing. And then you go and you get retested. So I ended up like doing quite a bit of cranial work, opening up his mouth, opening up his throat. And it was quite interesting because he's generally quite a very healthy person anyway, right? And you know that when he went to go do the test, I was so nervous because I was like, either I've paid like all this money and I've been studying and it doesn't, and it's kind of like it doesn't, doesn't work
Hmm.
cranial, or I thought either that or I'm totally rubbish at it and I'm not doing it properly, or the stuff works. And you know that his sleep apnea had improved by 48%
Well,
after 10 sessions of cranial? His wife was very happy because she was like, oh my God, I can sleep better,
yeah.
throughout the night. But it was just like, how incredible was that?
Yeah.
Right? Just simple, just opening all of that up, working with those avenues of expression, because that's what these are in cranial, in being able to explore and letting go of whatever trauma we're holding on to. We don't speak, our truth, which is very
And
interesting.
and that's why when people also develop this, when they have a cold and they have a cough,
Mm,
and they start coughing, and the chronic, uh, let's say, closure of the throat keeps by even months. Many people have
yeah,
colds and they last 1 month having these cough episodes. That just reflects that they need to express something. They
absolutely.
say
Yeah.
something about what is happening in their own lives, no? And
Yeah.
if they can say it, what I usually recommend to them is to write them, no? At
Yeah.
least write all the things that you feel and maybe you can't express because they are so difficult or they are really, really painful, let's say. Well,
Yeah.
you need to do something because you are obstructing this area, no?
Yeah, it's all about self-censorship, right? And unspoken truths, that hesitation of like, "Oh, I can't say this, what needs to be expressed." So you're right, journaling is a great way to do it in the sense where, or speaking it out into the mirror. Like
Yeah.
practice what you're saying, speaking to that higher self as well, right? But when it comes to looking at lungs, so when we're looking at pneumonia, and even if we're looking at colds and flus and stuff like that, is usually related in my world to grief, emotional depletion, loss of vitality, exhaustion, um, depleted resilience, low capacity to cope because we've hammered our bodies so much, right? We haven't given it the opportunity.
Mhm.
And it was the lungs are very much about receiving and releasing life as well. So, every cycle of breath is receiving and integrating and then releasing because even that between the breaths is so
Mhm.
important as well, right? When
Yeah.
you completely inhaled and then you hold and then you completely exhale, that is like the silence in music. It's that between the notes, it's absolutely brilliant, right? And when we start having issues with our lungs, when our rhythm is disrupted, it invites us to really start looking at, am I really allowing myself to receive support? Because our air supports all of our systems in our body as well, or am I holding on to old pain? If we start looking at it like that, and what am I afraid to let go of? Because a lot of the times we stay in what we know, even if it's uncomfortable because we know it, right?
Yeah.
And then in that case, asking, am I making space for something new? Like I usually tend to see like a cough, a cold, it's all release. Anything that comes out of your nose and out of your mouth everywhere. It's usually it's a release, it's a letting go of what is happening, right?
Mm.
Um, it's so interesting if we start looking at those things, breath and the nervous system, like we mentioned, when we feel safe, our breath naturally deepens. So
And
the other thing that
mhm,
I used to notice is just very quickly is my daughter, when she was learning something new, her
mhm,
breath, she would completely bring this calm, long, deep breath. You could see her breathing used to change.
mm,
And I think it was all that oxygen that was going into her brain to try and remember as she was learning, you
yeah.
know?
Well, it's really, really important to breathe much better when you are going to present an exam, when you are going to present any kind of cognitive task. That's why exercise before the exam, even if you can't go to a gym or you can do any of these, let's say, complex things about exercise, just having a walk 10 minutes or 15 minutes before the exam and trying to focus on your breath. And I was remembering also that we interviewed this, I forgot his name. I'm sorry, but I forgot that we interviewed a person
Yeah.
that spoke about the breathing through the nose. And
Yes.
breathing through the nose is extremely important, as we mentioned in that episode, because we allow the air to filter many of the particles to also start activating different kind of let's say, interoceptive systems, which means that your body is sensing all of these changes inside of you. And once you allow this air to come through your nose, it's a lot better the quality of oxygenation that you can have, no?
Absolutely. 'Cause we spoke about mouth breathing. Like my daughters are constantly telling us and how it actually affects your physical facial features.
Hmm. Yes.
Right, breathing through your nose and your mouth completely changes us. I was trying to find, I think his name was Tim. I'm
Yes,
trying
I
to,
think it's Tim. Yeah, I also think it's Tim. Yeah.
I'm just looking for well, anyway, it will yeah, we'll put a link under
We'll put a link
the
to that episode, yes, because it's very
yeah.
important that they also listen to this episode where we speak deeply about nose breathing, no? And
Yeah.
talking about this kind of lung capacity that we can have and cleaning our lungs and making them filled with air. I usually what I do when I swim is that at the end of my routine, I have two laps where I go without breathing in below the water, and I do these apneas in swimming,
Mm.
and this helped me to start having a much better capacity of holding the
Yeah.
air that I have. And then when I arrive to the other side, I
Mm.
take a big breath of air, and I think that improves also the quality of your HRV, which is the heart rate variability, that it's also
Mm.
related with that breathing techniques. No?
Absolutely. Absolutely. How would you relate air to the four pillars that you work with, David?
Well, there's a lot of that. Well, first, that's a beautiful question because I can really split it into many of these pillars.
Mm-hmm.
Air in terms of nutrition, it's
Mm-hmm.
extremely important for the first pillar, let's say, because if we don't have a proper oxygenation, as I mentioned at the
Mm.
beginning, mitochondria will not be healthy, and the
Yeah.
nutrition that you are going to have, it's not going to be, let's say, properly digested, properly uh, processed in terms of all the digestive tract and all the digestive absorption that it has to have in order to produce energy. And many times when we don't have this proper oxygenation in terms of the nutrition, what we do is that we start accumulating toxic products like lactic acid, or there is another one that I just listen and discover about that is succinic acid. And this
Mm-hmm.
succinic acid comes from the ATP cycle. And ATP cycle happens inside of the mitochondria. So
Yeah.
that's in terms of nutrition. In terms of the metabolism, well, it's all of these pathways are going to be affected. Your sleep is going to be affected as well. That is part of the metabolism, the sleep. Your immunity is going to be depleted because you are not properly giving the bacteria that need oxygen inside of your gut. You are going to deplete those types of bacteria that also need some of that oxygen. And you are going to start producing reactive oxygen species that are going to deteriorate your health, and they are going to make you age faster. In terms of the emotions, let's say your emotions when you don't breathe also are affected because, as you
Mm-hmm.
mentioned, the throat, your lungs, the the gut, all of these areas are start to get affected, and let's say you generate inside of you an environment that is a toxic inflammatory environment where
Mm.
your body is in constant threat, and then you will suffer of anxiety, depression, and many of these also cognitive issues like loss of attention or even early dementia. No, when you don't
Mm-hmm.
have this kind of proper expressions of your emotions and what you are having. That's why we are suggesting
Mm-hmm.
that you can journal, and when you can't speak the things that you are feeling, no? In
Yeah.
terms of the consciousness, and well, if we don't breathe, I don't think we can be conscious because we don't even have air in this area of the brain that is the
Yeah.
conscious part of our brain. And we also don't receive the same information that you also
Mm-hmm.
mentioned, that air is part of this informative pathway, let's say,
Yeah.
where we receive a lot of messages. So when we are closing that door for air and we don't breathe properly, we we lose consciousness of what we are doing and what we are, let's say, acting, no, and behaving. I did an episode yesterday of the three brains, how we connect them and how we balance all of them.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the conclusions that I gave in that podcast that I recorded yesterday was that every time we act, we should try to synchronize the three brains. The
Mm-hmm.
cranial brain, the one that is here
Mm-hmm.
in our mind, the other one that is the heart, and the next one that is the gut.
The gut.
So when we synchronize these three and we recognize the functions of these three brains, that's when we are acting in a conscious way, in an empathetic way, and in a way that
Mm-hmm.
not only is benefiting us in our lives, but it's also benefiting the community. You know?
Yeah.
And
Well, I
finally,
definitely think that the air connects us to consciousness.
and finally, we if we don't have all those pillars in place, of course, that the fifth one, that is abundance and money and material things, or all of these financial abundance, we won't be able to be productive, no? And that's why I see many people that complain about their jobs and complain about the productivity that they don't have because they are constantly in meetings, that they
Mm-hmm.
are just wasting time in those endless meetings. And well, they just have frustration, and with that kind of lack mentality, you cannot attract abundance, no?
Yeah. Yeah, if I look at air through absolutely 100% agree with you as well. It's quite funny because when you talk about the consciousness aspect, when I'm in my records, or in the records, for example, I'm in a different frame of mind. I'm in an absolute calm. It's that my breathing deepens. Like I had only realized in COVID when when I
Oh,
used to guest and I was like, you had to wear a mask, and I couldn't because I would look, I would suck in all the air of the mask and I couldn't breathe. And I was like, look, this is I can
yeah.
stand 2 meters away, but like, it's the only way I'm good. But luckily my clients were okay with all of that. But yeah, you're absolutely right. Like breathing does change throughout that. You absolutely breathe deeper. I think it's because you're running a lot more energy through your system as well. So it's also can't be full of food
Hmm.
either when we're connecting to that consciousness too.
Yeah.
If I were to run air through my blueprint code that I run, there's 9 zones. So if we look at it from the first one, which is foundation, if we look at air as a part of grounded thinking. So
Mm-hmm.
the more you breathe, the more grounded you are, the more clear you are under pressure. You make decisions with confidence. You hold the belief that supports growth and expansion because you can't, if you stop feeding something, you cut its air out and it stops like automatically, right?
Yeah.
Remain curious. And air teaches us to not be rigid, to adapt, right? Because it doesn't have form, which is brilliant, and if we are in alignment with our foundation, we know when to act and when to pause,
Mm-hmm.
when not to. So are my thoughts building, the life that I want to create, or the career that I'm wanting to create, or the business that I'm wanting to create as well? And then for me, the next one comes love, right? So
Yeah.
so air is about open-hearted communication, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because it governs that communication aspect of it as well. So speaking honestly and with kindness, or expressing our needs clearly is the other one. Or the thing about expressing is we forget that it's also about listening, right?
Mm-hmm.
We talk about speaking our truth, but we don't talk about how rare is it that people actually listen when you speak, right? Which is the other thing. So that is a big part. A good question to asking this, do people feel heard, seen, and valued when they're with me? Am I completely present?
Mm.
Right. And
Yeah.
then just start looking at areas like creativity, right? And air is all about ideas and generating those innovative ideas, right? We're thinking beyond our limits because air has no limit, right?
Mm.
It tends to solve problems creatively, right? It
Yeah.
turns inspiration into practical solutions as well, which is awesome. And then it's very important to balance execution with imagination as well. So it's really looking at, if we look at air when it comes to creativity, is like what idea is ready to come into reality,
Hmm. Yeah.
right? Yeah, and then we've got more. There's the support side of it as well, which like air asks us, it's that healthy exchange, that breathing, giving and receiving in that space of support as well. So how do we collaborate with others? Who do we collaborate with? Right? Even for us to collaborate, it took a while. Everything had to fall into place because we hadn't seen the vision of how we were going to do it until it all clicked in. Right?
Yeah.
Do you remember that? We were like, what are we going to talk about? It's like, yeah, and it's like, what can you offer, and what can I offer? How can we, both, collaborate on that, right? And then we
Yeah.
look at contribution, which is about purpose, which is purpose within your voice, right? Again, it's communicating, speaking from values rather than from your ego. How can we create that impact? How are we
Mm.
contributing to the world? And then there's the wisdom aspect of it, which is about discernment. So we separate facts from assumption because if we're not breathing properly or bringing in too much, we overthink, right?
Yeah. And
So it's very much, hey?
we assume things, and we have these unfulfilled expectations of
Mm,
what other people might act, do, or say. And
yeah,
that's when we have these communication issues, I think. No?
absolutely. Absolutely. The amazing thing about looking at air from a wisdom perspective is welcoming the different perspectives.
Mm.
Right? And it's not necessarily needing to agree with them, but hearing them, listening to them. Because I mean, it's people see it from their own lenses, right? So that is also related to the element of air, understanding before making the conclusions. But if we have all of the information, then we can make our own conclusion, you know. So it's really the question is, you know, am I seeking wisdom or simply collecting information? That's the other thing. With AI now, there's a lot of information, not enough wisdom. So we need to look at it from air. We actually have to think about what is the information that is being produced and is it in alignment, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I think now it's one of the most important, let's say, set points that we are going to start approaching, and we are already living it, to
Mm-hmm.
recognize what is true and what is not, how it
Yeah,
resonates with us, and how to connect with that inner consciousness that we have by
absolutely.
breathing, by closing our eyes, by connecting with this consciousness, as you say, by knowing our values, because that's one of the questions that I asked
Mm-hmm.
yesterday for people at the end of my episode. I said,
Yeah,
do you really know your values? Do you really
yeah,
have in place for at least your three or your five most important values in your life?
yeah,
Because
yeah,
if you have that, then you can assemble a strong foundation of your actions, of your
yeah.
congruence in life, and the coherence that you are creating between your brain and your heart. No,
Yeah, yeah. And that leads me very nicely to my next pillar, which is usually it's connection, right? So it's building conscious relationships,
exactly.
right? By connecting into those consciousness. So building those genuine relationships, you know, feeling connected to something greater. And, you know, and usually I ask what here is usually like you say, it's so good to ask those questions and to sit with them. It's like, you know, where can I deepen my connection instead of simply exchanging information?
Hmm.
Right, which
Talking
is so
about
interesting.
talking about
Yeah,
deep things and exchanging deep ideas, even if,
yeah,
as you mentioned, even if they are not, and they will not be the same that you have. No, but
yeah.
at least listen to why they think like that, or what is the
Mhm.
reason they believe those things. Then you can have a real conversation, no,
Yeah,
by
yeah.
simply listening the other point of view and how they grow up, probably.
Absolutely, absolutely. And you mentioned prosperity. That's the other one that we look
Mhm.
at as well. So, like, how do we create opportunities through conversation? How do we negotiate with integrity? That starts to look at the air as well, you know, or sharing our ideas confidently, or clearing, like you say, clearly expressing the value that, you know, we create, whether it's our own value or of our products and services, which is important. You know,
Yeah.
building trust through transparency.
One word that comes up with all of this dialogue is
Hmm.
ethics. What is
Ethics,
your
yeah.
ethics that you have when you do a business, when you do a negotiation, when you are offering
Hmm.
a product, when you are creating anything? What is the ethics that you have in terms of releasing that to the world
Yeah,
and really thinking not just about yourself, but about the other people that you are trying to help, no?
absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And when the other thing that we also have a look at as well is like the health and joy, or the, you
Mm.
know, the vitality. And
Well,
without air, we can't do any of that. That's what this whole podcast is. So, you know, it's our nervous system regulation as well. It's how we respond rather than react, right? And are we creating enough space when we breathe? It was so I did a 21-day abundance and prosperity journey, and I started quickly realizing that if we don't calm our nervous system, if we don't empty the vessel, we can't receive.
mm, yeah,
So
yeah.
bringing that calm to the nervous system actually helps us to create and to receive and to get out of that panic that we're in all the time, which is very interesting.
Yes, and I have observed many people that suffer from anxiety and depression and all of these emotional issues, and what you usually can perceive from that from those people is that they also have a very, let's say, Hmm. The words in English are not coming.
Say them in Spanish.
Yes. Well, they feel defeated, let's say, by
Yeah,
life. And they have this posture where they are like
yeah,
hunched and they
yeah.
are not breathing properly and the head is a little bit down. And
Hmm.
usually that reflects in the way they are not breathing properly. And
Yeah.
they don't allow also the oxygenation process to happen. And that's why they are creating these loops in their mind of rumination and
Hmm.
anxiety. You mentioned also these face masks, and I remember when I have to wear that in a flight. I never get dizzy on the flights, and I never get like any
Mm.
symptom during any of the flights that I have done. But during that season of COVID that I have to wear the mask in the plane, I really felt anxious and I really felt
Mm.
dizzy. I really had to take it away, even if these flight attendants told me,
Mm.
you have to wear it. And I said, no, I'm not going to wear it because I'm feeling bad just by wearing
Yeah,
this thing. So I'm sorry, do whatever you have to do, but I can't wear it anymore because I'm feeling
yeah.
already that anxiety and that pressure that I can't breathe properly. No? Hmm.
Yeah, and I think there is I think there were so many eye infections as well because of the quality of the air that we were breathing out of these masks. It was mostly carbon dioxide and all sorts of stuff like that we were
Yeah,
breathing
we are
in, which
we
wasn't.
were consuming a lot of carbon dioxide.
Yeah. Yeah. So it was just for me, that was just like I actually asked the optometrist, are you getting a lot more people with eye infections, during COVID because, of all of that as well. And yeah, she didn't really connect the two, but I was like, it's just brutal. But you're right, the quality of air is, and so when I did my flight, speaking of the quality of air, I used to put eucalyptus essential oil or camphor. So
Mm.
camphor during the pneumonic plague, it actually energetically clears the air up to a meter around you as well, which was very interesting. So using smells, and we had the lady that did the smells as well, which we can also add to this. It tended to clear the atmosphere and the air around us as well, which is quite beautiful in that sense of, and it used to clear it of disease. So that's why I thought, oh, there's so many people. So that's why I used to put it in our masks when we traveled on the plane during COVID as well. And it smells nice as well. It also would clear all the nasal passages and down into our throat and into our lungs as well, which was pretty cool.
So how can we wrap up all this information that we have already from the
Mm.
air element?
So I would say that in essence, air really is a circulatory system of consciousness.
Mm,
So just as oxygen moves through the body to nourish every cell, air allows ideas and purpose and relationships and wisdom to move through every area of our life. And it keeps our actual blueprint alive, of blueprint of ourselves, blueprint of our soul, alive and adaptable and connected. It keeps us connected. And it's constantly transforming knowledge into understanding, communication, I suppose, into connection, and inspiration into meaningful impact if we action with clarity and consciously. So stop and breathe. Notice how deep and how shallow you're breathing. And I think the most important thing is nothing stands still. And air reminds us of that. Because
mhm.
whether you're having a good time, that's not going to stand still. If you're having a not so great time, that's not going to stay like that forever either. So nothing stands still. And air reminds us it's important to give, just as important it is to receive. Because you can't just exhale, you need to inhale as well, right? So it's a complete, it's a give and take.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with many of those messages, and I can only say in the perspective of science that the air that we are breathing is one of the most important nutrients that we can give to our
Mm,
body, and it's one of the foundations of all your health in terms of
Yeah.
the nutrition that you are going to have, your metabolism, your sleep, your gut health, the emotions that you will be able to feel and express, and
Hmm.
the consciousness that you are connecting, the kind of, let's say, ethics that you are going to display in your life. And also, finally, I think if you pause and breathe, you can envision your life in a different way that if you're
Yeah.
only living through survival mechanism. No,
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. So I
thank you.
hope everybody's enjoyed that episode. Next week we'll target, well, we'll look at Earth, which is
Earth.
structure.
Yeah,
Yeah. I'm
perfect.
excited about that. Excited about all the elements.
Yes, it has been really, really nice to talk about these elements that we really don't pause and think about them.
Yeah,
No.
absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
thank you everyone for listening. And of course, we encourage you to connect with us to assess the podcast in the different platforms, to give us a rating so that our episodes are also being helped by the algorithms, and subscribe to our channel, pass the information along, and give us any kind of question that you can have, and suggest guests as well. Thank you very much for listening, and we will listen in the next one.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.